My paranormal experiences are vast. I think probably the first memory that I have of personally seeing something myself when I was about 15 years old. We'd recently moved houses, and my new bedroom was in the basement of the house. And I pretty much had the whole basement to myself, which was great as a teenager, but also it was a very big, dark space. This did not really freak me out when I first moved into the room, but shortly after we had moved, I started waking up and experiencing things. The first thing that I saw was a woman. She was standing over to the left of the bed behind the post that was in my room. And she was just kind of staring at me from behind the post. And when I would roll over and turn on the light so that I could see her better, as soon as I turned on the light and looked back, she would be gone. This happened for months before she kind of disappeared. From there, I started seeing a man walking towards the end of the room by the foot of my bed, and he would walk back and forth and pace, but he never looked over at me. I never heard him say anything. He would just walk back and forth. But the same experience, when I would turn on the light to get a better look, he was gone. Shortly after that, when I saw the man, I woke up in the middle of the night and someone had grabbed my foot and pulled me down on the bed. So I had slid down the bed further. It pulled me out of my sleep, and when I woke up, there was nothing there. This happened probably about 3 or 4 more times before I started just sleeping with the light on completely all of the time. This, however, did not make the woman go away. The woman still came back after that frequently. Not every night, but she would just be there some nights, and even with the lights on, I could see her. This continued until I went to college and I wasn't living at home anymore. But every time I came back from school, I would see her. And at that point, my sister was sharing the room with me downstairs. And when I would wake up at night and see the woman, she wouldn't be looking at me. She would be looking at my sister. Then she would turn around and look at me. And I don't know that I ever felt afraid of her, but she never said anything. She would just stare, and it gave me sort of an uneasy feeling because I didn't know why she was watching or why she was there so frequently. I experienced that for a couple of years until when I came back from college, I decided that I needed to move to a bedroom upstairs because I wasn't getting good sleep and I wasn't feeling rested and I wasn't feeling easy sleeping downstairs. Unfortunately, I started seeing different people when I moved to a room upstairs. It was still a woman, but it was a different woman. She had darker hair, and instead of being in my room all the time, she would be in different bedrooms where I would walk into them with lights on or off, and she would be there. But this woman didn't really look at me. She just would be in a corner or on the bed or by a dresser or by the closet. But I never really saw her face very clearly. When I go home to see my mom, I still see things. But a couple of years ago, during 2020, with the pandemic, I was living at home, and one of my sisters was staying in the bedroom next to me. And I was walking down the hallway by the bedroom, and I saw someone standing in the shadows, and this person was staring at me from the doorway, and they weren't made like a human. They were made of shadows, and he had a very evil look on his face, like sinister. He was staring me down. And I stood in the doorway for a minute and I stared back, and just kind of all of a sudden he kind of just faded away. And I haven't seen that figure again in the house, but it left a really lasting impression. And it made me wonder why I had been seeing so many things in that house in particular. And I still wonder that every time I go home, but there's nothing really I can do about it. There's no history of the house, of anybody dying in the house or anything like that. I've checked into that. And it makes me wonder if it's not necessarily tied to the house, but maybe tied to me. Since I've moved, I've been experiencing other things at this house that I live in now. I feel that it's different than before because it's not always people that I see. It's more like an aura or an energy, and it's different. And I feel that my dog senses things as well, because we'll be sitting downstairs and she'll look at different places upstairs or in different hallways, and she'll just stare, and nothing can really break her focus when that happens. She just keeps looking and looking. But I've never seen someone who is human shaped or had anyone appear to me at night or during the day. I have recently had different experiences that are much more confusing than I think that they ever were. I've started to be more aware of my surroundings and had more downtime. And in that downtime, I've been able to hear different things. And it sounds like when you're at a public pool and you're underwater and you can hear everyone talking above you, but you can't really hear anyone. It sounds like a bunch of voices just going on, and you can't ever really make out what one voice is saying or any conversation that's happening. And I've been experiencing this, and I've been trying to get to focus on one voice or one conversation and pull it out. But I've not yet had any success with that. I'll hear one word come through, but then the voice will just kind of fade away into the background again. I did have an experience the other day where I heard the name, just one name, one time, and it was Marcus. And I have not talked to anyone in my friend circle or family circle that knows anyone who's passed that's named Marcus. But it's something that's stuck with me, and it feels like it keeps repeating in my head is this name, Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. And it's like loud and it's constant. And I'm not sure if this is tied to the name Marcus or anything, but ever since I heard the name Marcus in my head, I've woken up with bruises along my hands and my arms that are perfectly round bruises on my hands and my arms. Some of them are purple, some of them are blue, so they look like they happened at different times, and I didn't notice them before. And then I had probably one of the most interesting experiences of my life a couple of weeks ago. I took my dog out to go for a walk for the night. And when we were walking, we walked across the complex over by the mailboxes. And there is a hill behind the mailboxes. And as we were walking, I turned and I looked up the hill to the houses on the hill, and I saw a shadowed figure on top of the hill staring down. And as soon as I saw this shadowed figure, it moved. And it was behind me in a grassy middle area with trees. And then as soon as I saw the figure there, it moved again. And it was behind some of the cars in the houses next to mine. At this point, I started walking back to my house. I was feeling very uneasy. I'd never seen anything like that before. And as I was walking, I kept my head up so that I could see if I saw anything else as I was walking back. And the shadow figure was going in between the cars and ducking and hiding. Like it was almost hard to see because it was moving so quickly. And as I got closer, it seemed to stop. It was moving slower. And then it came out from behind my car. And as I walked back up to my house, it was standing by the windows, by the bushes in front of my house. And as I got closer, I saw that it had yellow eyes. And it was just staring. And it reminded me of what I had seen at my mom's house, but it was different in a way because it had less form to it. It didn't look like a human form. It was more like blobby than the one that I had seen at my mom's house. I very quickly went inside the house and locked the doors. I took 2 cups of water and filled them. I put one outside the back door and one outside the front door. And I let a white candle burn down until it had went out. But I still felt just uneasy, like something had crept into my home, into my space. It didn't feel right. The air felt charged and different. And some of that could have been my own feelings, but it felt different than anything that I had really experienced before. I did not sleep very well that night. I again slept with the lights on, since in my experience, it seemed to kind of keep them at bay or make it a different experience. And I was lucky enough to be able to sleep that night. However, when I woke up the next day, I could still feel that there was something hanging in the air. It was different. It was a different feeling. I went to the store and I got sage and I started to try to cleanse my house. And that has only worked in the short term. Since then, it feels like it lasts maybe 24 to 36 hours of having that clean, positive energy space. And from there, it just kind of feels like it creeps back in. And so I have kept the sage out and accessible to see what I can do about that. But I don't know that it's really helping. But I am going to be moving to a different place soon. And my top worry at this point is that whatever this shadowed figure is that I've seen multiple times now is tied to me somehow and not the homes that I've been in. And it frightens me that I might bring it with. I want to kind of backtrack to something that happened that I have no memory of, but it's something that my dad told me about had happened. And it's something that I think makes it very clear that this is something I've experienced for a very long time. There was a day that I was riding in the car with my dad, and we were going around this curved road, and he was talking on the phone, and I was just sitting in the passenger seat, just looking out the window. And we ran around this one curve in the road, and he starts kind of hitting my arm, and he's pointing out the window, and he's saying, "Look, look, look." He's still on the phone, and I didn't know what he was talking about. And so I kind of ignored him because I'd never seen this house before or this part of the road. And when he got off the phone, I asked him why he had been hitting my arm and pointing out the window. And he said, "I wanted to know if you remembered it or what you thought about it." I told him that I'd never been there before. I don't know what he's talking about. And he said, "Something happened when you were about 2 years old, and I've never forgot it." And I asked him what happened, and he said that when I was 2 years old, I was sitting in the back seat of the car in a rear-facing car seat, and he was driving me, and we were going along this road, and there was two kids who were on snowmobiles riding on the side of the road in the ditch. And they were riding really fast, and he saw one of the kids lose control, and the kid came up onto the road, and there happened to be a car coming the opposite way, and the car hit the kid. My dad said that he immediately stopped the car and jumped out and ran to the boy to try to help him, but he had parked the car and opened the doors in a way that even if I had somehow managed to get out of the car seat, that there's no way that I could have seen anything. He ended up passing away on the road, the little boy, and there was nothing that anyone could do. He was gone pretty much immediately. But when my dad got back in the car, he said that I told him very clearly that it was okay because he was in heaven now and he was safe. And my dad was very freaked out by that because he came into the back seat and made sure that there's no way that I could have seen anything or heard anything at all. And there wasn't. And he went home after that happened, and he told my mom, and he said that he was just super freaked out, obviously, by seeing this child unfortunately die, but also by my words, because there was just no way that I could have known anything, especially being only 2 years old. And when he told me this in the car, I kind of felt freaked out because, around that same time is when I started experiencing the things in my mom's house in the basement, and it stuck with me. And so when I went home that day, I asked her about it. I asked her if she remembered him having this experience and him telling her about it. And she said she immediately knew what I was talking about, and she had kind of a dumbfounded look on her face. Like, it was surprising to her that it had come up so much longer in time that he had brought it up. And she said that she's always thought that I've seen different things. And I asked her why she thought that, because at this time when I started seeing things in the basement, I hadn't told anyone because I didn't want anyone to think that I was crazy or that I was lying or anything. And she said that there was just times in my life as a child where I would say things or do things that children shouldn't know or shouldn't, be staring in corners, or there was just things that made her feel that there was something that she wasn't seeing. I would say around this kind of time period in my life, instead of accepting what I was seeing, I turned very skeptical of the entire situation. And I kind of refused to believe that there was anything paranormal that really existed. Everything must be explained by something. There must be some kind of explanation. There's got to be some kind of trap. There's got to be some kind of joke or something. And I remember feeling that way for a while. And my mom and my grandma and my aunt, they got a Groupon ticket to do a ghost tour in the city. And we decided to go on this ghost tour, pretty much the whole family. And I was pretty excited because, it's a whole tour centered around ghosts. And I thought, well, this is definitely going to prove, that it's fake, because it's all about the money for them and they're just doing this for only one reason. And we went on this tour and it started, and, they asked the group, they said, who's a skeptic here? And I raised my hand very proudly and I said, I am, because everything just has to be fake. And we started this tour, and kind of as predicted, there was nothing happening. There was nothing that was going on. So we went into this building and we were up, and it was a dark building. It was kind of like an abandoned floor. It looked like they had been doing like some kind of construction. There was some plastic sheeting around. And we had little portable, like phone size voice recorder, EVP recorders with us. We were all holding one, and, nothing was coming through. There was a lot of us, so there was a little bit of feedback from just people's voices. But my aunt was holding one of them, and she was kind of away from the rest of the group, and it was kind of picking up little flashes of kind of a word or something. And my grandma, I remember she was kind of annoyed because she really wanted to have that experience. So she went over with hers and was right over by my aunt. And, hers was working fine, batteries in, everything. And hers wasn't picking up anything. So my aunt gave her hers and they switched. And my grandma walked away and she's like, oh, okay, well, it was probably just mine not working. And about as soon as she turned around and walked away, the one that she had given to my aunt started making noise right away. And at this point, we were in a different kind of corner. The tour guide was not really anywhere near us. And it just kept happening. Hers just kept working. And so I went over there and I was skeptical because I thought maybe she was pushing some kind of button, or I don't know. And so I walked over and I tried, and I put mine right next to hers, standing in the same spot, and nothing. And so I did the same thing. I gave her mine and switched with her, and I turned to walk away. And as soon as I turned to walk away, hers started making noise again, almost immediately. And it was at that point I kind of thought, maybe this isn't just about me being skeptical, because I'm experiencing something that's the same as my grandma, who was not skeptical and who was excited. So we only stayed a couple more minutes in that spot, and then we moved on to the next area. And this next spot, it was walking down into like a basement, like old tunnels and alleyways. And I guess one of the tunnels that we were in used to be a like hiding spot for a brothel. And so we were walking down the hallway, and at this point they had given us these rods, and I don't remember what they were called exactly, but you held them in both hands and they were supposed to spin if there was something that was nearby or communicating. And I was very skeptical of this because obviously if we were walking, I thought, well, they'll just start turning. But as I was walking down this hallway, I kept mine very still and they never moved. They didn't go sideways. They didn't go any type of way. They were very still as I was walking. And I wasn't walking very slow either. I was keeping a good pace down the hallway. And no one in my family or in the group, experienced anything in this hallway, in this tunnel. And as we walked down further, there was another area where it came to the basement of an old house. It was connected. And the tour guide said that there was supposedly a spirit of a young boy who had passed while he was living at the house, and that he was probably their most active and communicative spirit. So some of the people in my family in the group stayed in the hallway with the brothel, and myself and my aunt went into the room in the basement. And I stood by, there was a chair kind of by the door, and I stood right next to the chair. And I just looked around. And at that point, as I was looking around, the rods in my hand started spinning. And they started spinning quickly. And no one really saw me at this point. My aunt had kind of walked away to a different part of the basement. And I looked at one spot in the room to my right, and I didn't see anything, but that just felt like where I was supposed to be looking. And I remember then, as they were just spinning, my aunt came back over to me and she noticed, which kind of caught the attention of other people in my family and the tour guide. So everyone kind of piled into this small basement room at that point, and they were kind of just watching me because they were just spinning in my hands. And so then I kind of walked away and I said, oh, well, if it works for me, it has to work for someone else. And there was someone else in the group that wasn't in my family. And they came and they stood right where I had been standing. And she was looking around as well, and nothing happened. Her rods weren't spinning. Nothing was happening. So other people in the group, my family, came over and stood where I had been standing and saw if anything would happen, and nothing happened. And so just kind of to be funny at that point, I came and I stood back in that same spot just to see if it would work again. And almost immediately, as soon as I stood in that spot again and looked with my eyes in that corner or in that spot in the room, they started spinning again, almost immediately. And I was still skeptical at that point, especially given that I had admitted to my skepticism, before this tour. Hindsight, I maybe wouldn't have said that, so that maybe it would have been maybe a different experience that I would have had. I don't know. But when I went to stand back there in that spot, there was a ball that rolled out of the corner where I had been staring. And it rolled over and it landed by my feet. And so I put the rods down and I gave them to someone else, or I put them on the chair. I don't remember. And I kind of tossed the ball back over in that spot. And there was a couple of people standing around that area, so it wasn't dark. I mean, you could definitely see in the spot. And as I tossed it back, I kind of just was there for a moment, and it had stopped rolling. And I remember I talked, and I said, "Do you want to send the ball back to me now?" And the ball came rolling right back over and landed by my feet. I ended up kind of rolling the ball back, and I again stepped out of the way to see if it would work for anyone else. And the same thing has happened to the rods. It didn't work for anyone else. They would toss the ball and the ball would stay there. And at that point, I think the tour was coming to an end because the tour guide told us that we needed to, start to leave. And he started to go up the stairs into the house where we were in the basement. And he started first, and everyone in the group and my family started following him up the stairs. And it was me and my aunt that were the last ones up. And the ball rolled back over to where I was. And I rolled it one last time. And I said goodbye to the little boy. And that was that. But I think it was at that moment that I really embraced that maybe there was something that I was experiencing, or some part of me that was able to see things or hear things that was different than other people. And it was about this time that I had ended up, leaving to go to college. And so I wasn't experiencing things in the same way because I wasn't in that house and I wasn't with my family doing these events. And I think really from the ages of, 18 until I was about 21 or 22, the only experiences that I had were at my home when I went home for weekends. But I didn't experience anything when I was at college, living in the dorms or anywhere else. I never had any experiences like that. And that's always kind of stuck with me because I find it odd that I would be in such a big space with so many people that have come through, so many different types of people, so many different energies, not necessarily people that have died, but, different circumstances, that I would have thought that maybe there would have been some kind of experience there, but there just never was. And I feel as though I've gotten older that things have changed. They're not the same as they used to be. For instance, this shadowed person that I saw outside my house is the first thing that I've seen that has any kind of form to it in a long time. For a while, I was really just seeing kind of the blobbed figures and objects. And previously, I was really never able to hear anything. But even just getting one name or knowing that there's a conversation going on is different as well. And I do want to get to a point where maybe I can hear or focus on one of those voices rather than the whole thing. I think maybe it would make it easier for me to understand, or for me to feel more comfortable in the things that I've experienced pretty much my whole life. And I want to be more open with that side of myself, because I think it's also possible that at those times in my life, I've closed that part down because it's scared me. And I don't want it to scare me, because if it's something that's happening, then I want to experience it. But at this point, I'm trying to be more open and welcome any experiences that I have, so that I can hopefully learn from them and eventually just understand who I am as a person.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.